Skeptic Zone, a miracle of technology. A universe of reason, the Skeptic Zone.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, show number 40 for the 24th of July 2009. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. On today's show, we have an interview with American magician and mentalist Jamy Ian Swiss, recorded at the Amazing Meeting 7 in Las Vegas. Also, from the Amazing Meeting, we have the entire press conference of Connie Sonne, the lady from Denmark, who attempted to prove to us all that she does indeed have magical powers unknown to science. But let's start straight away with the interview with Jamy Ian Swiss. Jamy Ian Swiss is a sleight of hand artist and a world-renowned performer specializing in close-up and intimate card magic. He is also a corporate entertainer, a stage mentalist and mind reader, a lecturer, public speaker, author, teacher, consultant, designer, TV writer, skeptic, and a hell of a nice fellow. I caught up with Jamy in Las Vegas at the Amazing Meeting. It's Tam 7 in Las Vegas. Having a really great time. It's only day one. Well, it's really officially kicked off today, though, although there were some workshops yesterday. And
it was a great workshop at about 12 o'clock.
Was there?
You might have missed about the intersection of magic and critical thinking.
I did miss that.
Shame you missed it. Awful shame.
That's the voice of Jamy Ian Swiss. Delighted to meet you at last.
A pleasure to meet you at long last, sir.
Yeah. Now, you had a wonderful session today on the stage, the main stage, with James Randi, which was turned into a wonderful, like a fireside chat, and showing highlights of Randy's fascinating career. Was that their idea or your idea?
That's my idea, actually. Randy... I have a long relationship with Randy, part of which he didn't know about, because it began really with Randy as inspiration. I mean, I remember seeing him on television in my childhood, and I wanted to do that. I wanted to be a magician, although I was a magician for much of my life, first 29 years of my life as an amateur, strictly as an amateur. It was actually a later in life career change. And then he was a hero to me and really altered my thinking about skeptical activism. I started in magic when I was very young. I read a book on Houdini, and I was fascinated by his psychic busting escapades, more perhaps than even about his escapology. And I can remember going back as far as elementary school, kids coming to me and saying, wow, I'm reading Sherlock Holmes, and me saying in return, well, don't you know that the guy who wrote that was an idiot who believed in fairies cut out of cardboard? So I think I was kind of an innate skeptic from the beginning. But in the 1970s, when I read a book which has since been retitled, but I love the original title, which was called The Magic of Uri Geller. And this is a book that had a profound impact on me. It didn't really teach me anything that I didn't already know. I knew that what was going on was fake, was magic tricks being presented as psychic feats. But Randy presented it in a way that made it clear to me what the moral implications and what the human implications were. Yeah. And I would buy copies of the books. I would order copies of the books from bookstores.
When it was still called The Magic.
When it was The Magic of Uri Geller. I would go into a bookstore and I would ask if they had it. And if they didn't have it, I would have them order 6 copies for me. And then I would gradually give away the copies. And then I would go in and order them someplace else to get them on the shelf. And I'm by no means alone in this. If you talk to Banachek, he'll tell you exactly the same thing. The book had a profound impact, I think, on a generation of us. And so there was that stage of it. And then in 1985, 85 or 86, I suppose, with my friends and colleagues, Chip Denman, the statistician, and Grace Denman, and the late Phil Klass, we began the National Capital Area Skeptics in the Washington, D.C. area, where I was living at that time, and began to become active in the skeptical movement, in the skeptical community, got to start to know Randy and work with him as a colleague.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the line, that blossomed into a friendship. I don't remember a time now, really. I have to work hard to remember a time when Randy wasn't in my life in that way. And the truth of the matter is that even after all these many years and all the different adventures and time spent together, when the phone rings and the voice on the other end says, "It's Randy," there's still a little part of me going way back to maybe when I was watching, the Wonderama TV show when I was 8 years old. There's still a little part of me that wants to look around to somebody in the room and go, it's Randy. So 2 years ago at TAM, I suggested the idea that we have a conversation on stage to talk. Actually, what really happened was I was down in Florida visiting him just for fun, and he showed me some clips of this show he had done in Korea just a few years ago that was based on the $1 Million Challenge, where it was a local team that were doing these investigations based on his idea, and he was sort of a host in the studio kind of thing. And they did some fantastic stuff. I mean, I
would love to see that.
Oh, man, they busted some great stuff, some great fakers, and they made great TV out of it, too, which is not always easy to do. Yeah. And I was just looking at it at the JREF, and I said, "Man, this is great. Has anybody seen this stuff?" I went, "Well, we got to show this stuff." And I thought, well, why don't we just come into TAM and have a conversation, and I'll go through this stuff and I'll pull out some highlights. And so that was what we did 2 years ago. And then this year I thought, well, let's do something else. The whole conference is skepticism. Everybody knows about this. I know that even beyond that, Randy is first and last a magician.
Yes.
And that's what we have in common. And first and foremost, and I thought, well, let's talk a little bit about his career that people don't know about. I mean, so you saw, not only some old magic clips and escape clips and stunts, underwater and being
things I've never seen before.
I mean, just Superman stuff, really Superman stuff. But then, things that this audience didn't know about, the movie, the film that is now available on DVD was not for some 30 years, the $1 Billion Babies tour from Alice Cooper, and Randy was on that tour for 3 months, playing an on-stage character. Yeah. So we showed some of that. And then finally, the upside-down straitjacket escapes, one over Niagara Falls from a crane in the middle of January, over the Horseshoe Falls, and another in Japan, suspended from a helicopter. He's Superman. It's hard to believe that, the guy is sitting there next to you, and he's done all these things. I'm still astonished by it, quite frankly.
And so much more. Besides these wonderful, entertaining...
Precisely. This is just his career, just merely, whatever you want to say, his career as an entertainer, as an escapologist, as a magician. And now we begin with the fact that he's, a MacArthur Grant Award winner and an author and is basically the most important invisible skeptic in the world. I mean, let's call it what it is. Psychop back at the beginning is... conversation. My friend Ray Hyman is here from the executive committee of PsyCop, one of the founders, and I've had the privilege of spending time with Martin Gardner, thanks to Randy. Some years ago, actually, Randy called me up and said, "I'm going to visit Martin. You want to come?" Wow. Do I want to come? Are you kidding me? And we went and visited Martin for a few days, which was absolutely, utterly fabulous. And, that room, Martin Gardner, James Randi, I'm talking about Ray Hyman. He wasn't there with us that day, but I was just talking to Ray about his history with Martin and Randy and myself. That's a room full of magicians.
Yeah.
And Martin and I got out a pack of cards and talked magic for a while. Yeah. So, and yet these are really the people who founded the activist American skeptical movement. And we're talking about it even before Paul Kurtz, who eventually came from the academic side and had the letter about the astrology with leading thinkers signing on to it, making this public statement. that eventually built to the creation of PsyCop, now CSI, and so on. So
you're reminding me of Randy's past achievements and his TV spots. There's something that I think the JRF recently put on YouTube, and they're putting a lot of old these things, which are just gold. They're wonderful to look at. It must have been in the very early days of Geller, where James Randi then went on some chat show or other, and simply what he did reproduced what Geller did. And one of the people in the little audience or the little panel was a Geller supporter, some doctor or scientist or whatever, and the clogs in his brain falling apart when Randy simply did them again and put it straight to him. And I'm a magician, and I can do it as easily as he can.
Right, and Randy likes to say, if he's using supernatural powers to alter the forces of nature, he's doing it the hard way.
But it's also fascinated me, and it still does to this day, that people would rather or prefer the complicated answer, which is paranormal, mystical power, than, it's a trick.
Yes, and I often point out that even though I do talks all around the country about critical thinking and so on, that in the end, we skeptics often make the mistake of thinking, well, if we just present the evidence, if we just present the evidence against astrology, if we just present the evidence in favor of vaccination, if we just present the fact that we can duplicate the magic tricks of a psychic, rational inquiry would suggest that this should be enough to alter someone's worldview. Well, it doesn't, because the worldview is what's more important to many people.
Yes.
And is the deciding factor rather than the evidence. You have to first buy into the notion that evidence from a double-blind test that you didn't personally conduct, perhaps, is actually more important about how you make decisions about the world than your personal experience.
And that's
a counterintuitive idea.
Absolutely.
That's a counterintuitive idea. There's a book by Framer, I think it's the early 90s, called Uncommon Sense. He talks about the fact that the scientific method is a completely unnatural way to think.
It is.
And that if it wasn't, aside from the Greeks sort of playing with it for a little, brushing up against the notion for a while, really we're only going back 400 years to the time of Galileo. Well, what is 400 years in geologic evolutionary time? To say it's a blink of an eye is a gross exaggeration, isn't it? And so you really have to wrestle yourself into the notion that that's how you find out what's true, and that's more important than what your own personal feelings are about what might be true.
And where they have, or we have the disadvantage, I might say, is that takes learning and explaining, and you have to get your mind around certain things, and sometimes that's not easy, whereas I know it's true because I saw it is instant, it's heartfelt, and it can seem a lot more real.
Right, and it's the myth of personal validation, and it's really the worst kind of evidence in the world, because if seeing was the only thing you need to believe, then every time I do a magic trick, how do you determine the difference between that and reality? And I've had this discussion with attorneys about evidence, about legal evidence in the courtroom. Matter of fact, I recall now offhand, Randy and I did a conference some years ago, kind of a workshop, the Isaac Asimov series somewhere. And we staged, along with Chip Denman, an accident in the opening session, right? A waiter who walks through and suddenly drops a pitcher of water and some glassware. And while that happened, we rearranged some things. We changed clothing very quickly and some other things like this. And then we asked people to break into breakout groups and report what they had seen. And, nobody came up with it when we showed them that, some guy had gotten up in the middle of all this. And it was only a few seconds misdirection, but, someone had picked up a huge fire extinguisher from one end of the room and carried it to the other end of the room in front of the entire group and then walked out the other door. Not one person reported it. Okay? So my point being that we have a prejudice, a bias in the legal system that says that gives great weight to eyewitness testimony. And if it was up to me, I would suggest that today, that seemed to make sense perhaps a century ago or more, but today when you have scientific forensic evidence. This is considered so-called circumstantial evidence. But really, juries should be instructed, in my opinion, to give the greatest weight to scientific evidence. And while they may be allowed to consider eyewitness testimony, they should assume it to be the lowest value on the totem pole.
Again, this intuitive thing.
Yeah, because what people see, human beings are terrible observers. That's the reason you need the double-blind test, isn't it? Because we are innately pattern-seeking animals who, the great problem of life is always to try and detect the difference between confluence and causality, right? Yeah. Isn't that the great challenge of the human condition?
It is.
So we're pattern-seeking animals, which mostly works for us more times than not, but often works against us. We see patterns that aren't there.
But in our long history, going back millennia, obviously it's worked more for us than against us.
Right, but it also is why you dance for rain.
Yes, yes.
Okay? Yeah. Because one day after a long drought, you happen to dance that afternoon, it rained, and now you're dancing for rain for the next millennia.
Yeah, yeah.
That's.
Nevertheless, it has got us here.
Yes.
And
partly it's got us here, partly we've got here despite it.
Despite it. Nevertheless, we have now come into a point of the human story where we are in a privileged position, unlike most of our ancestors, of course, of having a real good understanding about these matters. And this is due to the scientific method, of course. But it still is, as you say, it's counterintuitive. It really is.
It is. And, Neanderthal man buried his dead with food and tools over 30,000 years ago. And we don't know exactly what he was thinking, but it's not unreasonable to guess it had something to do with the notion about the afterlife.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a kind of innate thinking that we're still faced with today, that gives religion power, that gives superstition power, and that, we just stepped out of a presentation about people fighting the notion of vaccines.
Yes, yes.
And this is no longer just a philosophical argument, and it's not even any longer an argument about whether someone is bending a spoon by sleight of hand or by thinking about it. This is life and death for children. That's a terrifying.
It is, but the people were making the comments, well, what can we do? What can we do? What I was seeing now, and this sort of relates back to what you were saying before, where you had the book, The Magic of Irigella, which inspired you and etc. Well, now when people like yourself or Randy or whatever do something, thousands and thousands of people hear about it. Not just somebody finding a book in a bookshop and then going from there. Thousands of people are going to be listening to this. Thousands of people follow the JRF and what Randy has to say and Phil Plait and all the rest of them. It's a powerful
Okay, but I'll
thing.
be skeptical for a moment, if you'll forgive me,
yes.
And say that compared to the number of ears that get to hear what's going on at the JRF, how many people get to hear Oprah Winfrey supporting Jenny McCarthy or making The Secret a best-selling book. The Secret, which is a book with both an ancient and evil idea that people who are sick and don't get well, or people who are poor and don't get better, are the victim of their own poor thinking. That's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
It's a really terrible idea. So, I think that part of the purpose of the skeptical movement, yes, of course, first and foremost, I suppose, is activism in the sense of public education and the sense of providing information. But it's also, there's another side to it. And a lot of that side, and a lot of what goes on here, for example, at the Amazing Meeting, is association with people of like mind.
Yeah, and that's very human, isn't it?
It's extremely human, and it's extremely necessary.
Yeah, yeah.
I was a co-founder of the National Capital Area Skeptics some 21, I think, years ago. 2 years ago, I helped found the New York City Skeptics. I work with the Center for Inquiry. I work with TAM, and much of this is to be with like-minded people.
I agree.
And, there are worse things you can do with your time than spend it among the great minds of your generation, right?
When you put it that way, you're absolutely right. But, of course, the flip side, and again, it relates back to what you were just saying, the reach of Oprah and all that sort of thing is, of course, this goes across all walks of life. People, no matter what their outlook, they want to associate with like-minded people, and by and large, I'm sure they all think they're right. as we probably do too. You see what I mean?
Right. Well, my friendship then likes to say that although we like to think that we believe what we want to believe, more often than not, human beings believe what they need to believe. The things that make us feel better in the night.
Yeah.
You know, when it's a large and dark and lonely universe.
Yeah.
And those are difficult forces to work against. Rationality is often not enough.
Yes.
Right?
For some people, possibly so, but yeah, I take your point. Now, listeners, without my noticing it, I don't know how this happened. Maybe it's because I'm in the presence of a magician. A card has appeared on the table.
Oh, my goodness.
Look at that.
How did that get there?
It wasn't there a second ago. What's that card say?
Well, this card is about a couple of upcoming events that I'm involved in. One is for the National Capital Area Skeptics. I'll be doing a day in the fall, probably in October, jointly between the National Capital Area Skeptics and the Center for Inquiry. Myself and DJ Grothy, the host of the wonderful podcast Point of Inquiry, will be doing a day on the intersection between magic and skepticism, not unlike the workshop that we did here at TAM. And then also in September, in the fall, September 12th actually, the New York City Skeptics, along with the New England Skeptics, are jointly producing the first Northeast Conference on Science and Skepticism, which we have dubbed Nexus, NECSS. You can find out more at NECSS.com. nexuscon.org, and this will be an all-day, one-day convention, sort of for the Northeast, featuring Carl Zimmer and Paul Offit and the Skeptic Guide to the Universe folks, Massimo Pagliucci, who's actually on our board of directors in the New York City Skeptics, John Rennie, the recent editor-in-chief of Scientific American, and we'll be talking about vaccinations and about public education and about media and science and so on. And so that's some of the latest thing that some of the local groups I'm involved in are.
That's very exciting for Zone listeners too, because one of the speakers is none other than our very own Dr. Rachel Dunlop from the Skeptic Zone.
Yes, and we're delighted she's going to be in town and be able to join us on this as well.
She is very excited about being part of that.
That's great.
That's happening not long after Dragon Con.
That's right after Dragon Con.
And we're doing Dragon Con, and then she's jetting up to take part in that, and I can't tell you how excited she is to be part of that.
Right. Well, New York City Skeptics is new, and we've been doing public programs and on a growing pretty well under a short amount of time, and this is something that had been in conversation for a while, if we could get sort of a regional conference together. So we'll start this with this one-day event, and hopefully, if it's successful, we'll get to build on it going forward.
Fantastic. Well, a pleasure to meet you at last again.
Likewise again. Thank you so much for having me.
Anytime, and you're welcome to come back on the Skeptic Zone anytime you wish.
I'd be delighted. Thanks.
In the zone for myth-busting and more, the Skeptic Zone come to Perth. Richard Saunders and Dr. Rachel Dunlop will be in Perth on the 8th of August to give our talks Skepticism 101 and Dr. Rachie Reports Adventures of a Scientist in an Alternative Medicine World. This is in support of the Rationalist Society in Perth, and we'd like to thank the Perth Atheists and Western Australian Humanist Society, as well as the UWA students. And a big shout out to Steve Jameson. Thanks, Steve. Without your support, we wouldn't be going to Perth. Perth in the zone for myth-busting and more. Free talks, Saturday the 8th of August. For more information, visit www.skepticzone.tv.
Hi everyone, this is Andy Kaiser. Richard Saunders was nice enough to let me interrupt the Skeptic Zone to tell you about another gust of wind in the maelstrom of worldwide critical thought. Digital Bits Skeptic is a podcast dedicated to skepticism and critical thinking in our world of New Age, religion, and credulous pop culture. I myself write a few articles, but most are written by everyone else, and they're paid for that effort. If you're an expert in your field, if you need a forum, or if you want to make an impact on not just the skeptical community, but the world at large, I'd like to talk to you. Or if you'd just like to listen to a quality skeptical-minded podcast, that's great too. Find Digital Bit Skeptic at www.dbskeptic.com.
Thank you to everybody who came up to see me at the amazing meeting, and thank you for those who bought my origami earrings. I've set up a little store at skepticzone.etsy.com. It all goes to helping the Skeptic Zone podcast. Connie Sonne from Denmark thinks she has powers unknown to science, despite failing the preliminary test for the James Randi $1 million prize. Now, failing this test is nothing new. In fact, no one has ever passed this stage of the $1 million prize before. However, this time, the preliminary test was conducted in front of a live audience of over 500 people and also broadcast live as a streaming video for many more all over the world to see. Briefly, Connie was asked to use her powers to guide her to find 3 playing cards hidden from view in envelopes. You can see the entire test by visiting the YouTube channel of the James Randi Educational Foundation at www.youtube.com/user/James Randi Foundation. So, you may wish now to pause this podcast, take a look at the video of the test, and come back to hear the press conference held immediately after the test. Now, here is the audio of Connie's press conference.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. And I guess we should start this off with questions about the test, questions you have for Connie or the JRED or anything about the challenge. Just yell out anything you like, and we'll get this started. Yes, DJ.
Connie, after you failed the test, do you have second thoughts about how fair it was?
No, not at all. I do know what I can and what's behind. It's good. So it's okay?
Can you elaborate on you do know what you can and what's behind?
Yeah, the story is huge, very. So I had to try to. Oh, sorry. Okay. I still, even though I missed this challenge, other things will come. And I don't know what yet, because I have to follow some steps at a time, one step at a time. Everything sticks together, if you know what I mean. And I have to do a step, like a puzzle, if you say so, to do some things before I can do some other things. This stuff about dosing, it's not the real thing. I mean, there's much more I could show if I was allowed to. Today, I was not allowed to show you that I could find it, because I can. I'm not. Yeah, okay.
Okay, just real fast, let me go ahead and do a quick introduction. I assume that we all know each other incredibly well by this point, so just in case we don't, we have Mr. Randi down here, Van Check, Bill Plate, Connie, Jeff, and I'm Allison.
Is there any test that if you failed would convince you that you did not have the ability?
No, not at all.
Connie, could you tell us, do you have any idea why you think you failed this test today?
Yes. Actually, before I went to the States, I had a thought about it, that I would fail, because something else are going to happen. And if you follow my name, I will sometimes, I can't say a time horizon, but if you follow my name at the net, for example, there will happen things.
But other than speculation about the future, you have no specific explanation as to why you failed today.
Yes, I have. because it wasn't the right time for people out there to get the truth. Now you can doubt about it all, but you could see something was going to happen when I does, right? And it's not me. It's not through me. The powers come from outside.
Connie, Richard Saunders from Sydney, Australia. Did you try before coming here to give yourself a similar sort of test with cards and envelopes and that sort of thing?
One more time, please. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before you came here,
Yeah.
did you try to test yourself in Denmark with cards in envelopes?
No, I don't have to.
I see.
Yeah.
Alan Kosler from Des Moines. What specifically have you done successfully with the dowsing?
Many things. As I told before, the story is very huge. And one of my missions, if you can say so, there's no religion in it at all. There's no God or something like that. It's not about that. But one of the huge missions, it's not like this. It was a part of it, of course. But I did find the British missing girl, Madeleine McCann, and I was told to do it, and I have the evidences. And why, I can shortly explain. I have went to the police, it's all the governments everywhere.
Well, separate from the fact that you just...
Wait just 1 second, let me go ahead and bring everyone up to speed on that. For those of you who don't know, Madeleine McCann is a 5-year-old girl who disappeared from Portugal. She's a British girl, and Connie has been in, if you look in your package, she's been in magazines giving interviews about where she believes Madeleine McCann is.
But none of the information you found has actually found Madeleine.
No. And why? That's the question. It is because the top of the governments, both here and there, is involved, and also the police. And I do have evidences of whom. It will come.
Did you actually...
South America now. And I was there before Christmas.
Did you actually use dowsing like you did today to find Madeleine?
No, not like that. Well, when I started to do what I'm doing, it was really 2 years ago now. I started with dowsing. I have never done that stuff before. But some friend told me that I had a crystal ball in my window, and a friend told me I could dose with it. And then I tried, and suddenly all things happened at once. 2 years ago.
Hi, I'm Paulo from Spain, and beside Portugal. So you can imagine that I know a lot about this case. You know how many people say that they have seen her?
Yeah, but it's a lie. Many.
They are all liars except you.
No. Some of it are lies.
Some.
We are being manipulated. Yes, because we are not going to forget her. It's a sort of propaganda, if you can say it so. And Maddie, she's all right. They keep her for a special reason.
But why?
She is the chosen one. And
the chosen one.
It will come. The story is mega huge. Mega. I could talk, if you push the button on here, I could talk in a week now. Really. So I don't want to
do you hear voices or somebody?
No, it's many different little things. They write on my computer, talk to
You say they. Who are they? Who are they?
What's behind us all? No God, no. But there is something else.
They.
Okay. So it's not only in my head now. It's with my own eyes, with my own ears, and someone else can hear and see it too. Mm-hmm. But it's a huge explanation too. So if you look at the internet in August or September, I will write all of that.
I don't know what the protocol is here. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Connie. Today, instead of just saying, I can't get it, you said, this is the card, and then you went to the next one and said, you didn't say, I don't think it's a card, you said, this is the card, and then I asked you the end.
Yeah.
And yet, you were wrong. I'm asking this respectfully, please.
Yeah.
At the end, you were wrong on those. How do you know that the same thing's not the same doesn't apply with Maddie? Because you believed you were right today. How do you know that that's not the same thing with Maddie?
Because I know it's the truth. What is the truth behind? I know several things I won't tell you here now, right now, because if I told, yeah, you could push my button, I will talk and talk and talk. But when I pointed out the cards by Dawson, they showed me it was the right cards. But sometimes they are lying because I had to find something out myself. And this kind of stuff today here, it's probably because all the atheists and non-believers and they are going to think maybe a little more different like they used to do.
Don't you get that in the real world too, though, with Maddie? Don't you get that in the real world with Maddie?
No, I didn't.
Be out there with Maddie, when you're looking for Maddie, don't you get the skeptics and don't you get that same
No, not
thinking?
really. But it will come, and I will write it all down. And sometime we will come to a point where we got hold on it. If you hold on the story, I mean.
Can I ask you one more question about the test?
Yeah.
Just and then I You approached the foundation, they didn't approach you, you approached them.
Yeah.
And you pretty much set the protocol, you said what it is that you could do. You knew that you were going into a group of skeptics. You knew that ahead of time, and yet you did it anyway, knowing full well that, as you say now, that might dampen your abilities in some way. Why did you do that?
Because I know still the truth, what is behind. So even though people are trying to convince me of other things, no way.
Well, Connie, you must understand something. We're not trying to convince you of anything. You are trying to convince us of something. You have voluntarily done this, and I congratulate you for your practice and your openness and your willingness to subject yourself to a power double-blind test like this. But we're not claiming that these powers don't exist. We never have. We've only said that we don't see any evidence for them, and we offer $1 million prize to someone who can show us that we're incorrect in our thinking in that direction. So I don't think we're trying to convert you or change your mind or use anything against you, or that we have any lack of respect for your beliefs and such. That's not the case. So we want you to understand that 100%. Please.
I was very excited when I pulled that first card out, and it was a low card as well. And of course, it was hearts. And as a magician, you go, okay, you're always trying to get the suit and that. You go, well, it's hearts. Oh, yeah, it's supposed to be a heart. And then it's like a low card, too. I mean, maybe she got it right. So I was very excited for you at that moment. Yeah.
I was not allowed to do it this time because things are going to happen at the right time. All of us.
Also, as a side note, everyone, if you consult your packets, the agreement, item number 6, I do not believe that taking my challenge test in front of a large audience will influence my claimed ability in a negative way. Right there.
Question for anyone from the JREF. Was this the most visible or largest scale live audience watching? And if so, were there any other ways in which this test was exceptional?
I suspect that it probably was the most widely viewed, not only from live audience right at the auditorium, but on the internet at the same time, I'm told. And how many did we have? 1,700 or something?
We had approximately 600 to 700 in the room with us. We're amazingly quiet. You guys amazed me.
Yes. Oh, that amazing quiet.
And there were 1,700 people watching live on the internet at the peak. You know, it comes and goes. And a lot of them were from Sweden. Actually, at one point, I had to moderate the chat room because people were talking in Swedish.
Denmark?
I'm sorry.
So my answer to that would be, though, Jeff, I think that you'll agree with me, this is probably the most widely live viewing of any test that we've done.
Absolutely. This was the most visible, most widely promoted, and most viewed test we have ever done.
Okay, Mark?
I just have one question in summation. What I hear you saying is that this experience is a stepping stone to something greater, and you're either ready for it or you're not, and there is some reason why you're here that may not have anything to do with playing cards. Am I understand?
It is true.
Okay. I just wanted to get that.
If I can ask a question, knowing the test protocol beforehand, did you practice at all? Get some envelopes and cards?
I don't have to.
We get this answer all the time, though, from people. We always ask them specifically, please try a double-blind test under the conditions that we've outlined, and please do test yourself independently. And in every case without fail, people have said, no, I don't need to do that because I know it's going to work. So I'm just putting that out.
Maddie, if you look in the packet, Maddie has worked with people before where she's guest cards that were face down, but none of the other ones were face down, right?
Numbers, I think.
Numbers,
yes.
Numbers.
Okay, Michael?
Yeah, a question for the JRED. Was there any concern with something this large scale about exploiting and tests this large scale? Is there any concern in exploiting mentally ill or any concerns along those lines at all?
Well, Michael, we try very hard, and we certainly did in this case, of course, to sort out any such cases, because there are people out there who are emotionally unstable in many ways, and who make the most incredible claims, much more incredible than the claim that Connie had made, and we effectively have to get rid of them because we don't want to exploit people who are touched in the head, if we can use the common expression. Yes, we go through a lot of pain to make sure that that doesn't happen. We have to be fair to folks. And I think that Connie will agree that we have been perfectly fair and above board with her, and the evidence is still in the envelope, can be examined by anybody. And incidentally, I think that I have to give personal thanks to my good friend Banachek here, who did an absolutely superb job of doing this correctly, succinctly, and the way the book calls for it. It was a definitive test.
DJ, did you say something?
Yeah, I guess the question I was going to ask is a little similar to the last question. For the JREF, for the members of the foundation on the panel, what sort of quality control, if there is various levels of quality among claimants, do you go through, and how do you select among the claimants that you test? I think all of us can agree that Connie is sincere and she's not trying to pull one over on anybody. She came here and is earnest. How do you know that she's the best we have to test if we're going to be doing such a public test?
Well, for one thing, two of the new additions to the protocol is that you have to have a media presence. That is, that somebody has paid some attention to you before, that you're not just somebody living in an attic who decides to send us a letter and want $1 million. And the second thing is that we have to have an academic reference, which Connie provided to us, saying that she had done a test which was relatively successful and certainly promised that it seemed to produce indications that it would be successful in a formal test. So that is part of the filtration. But I will admit to you that it is difficult to do. And we don't want to offend anybody. We don't want to leave anybody out who has a legitimate claim they really believe they can fulfill. So it is a difficult procedure. I agree with you there.
I just want to make sure that the perception isn't that we're choosing anyone. Everyone who goes through the application process gets tested. So we don't have, let's test this one, let's test that one. Every single person who goes through the application process gets tested.
In fact, they have a testable claim.
Well, they won't get through the process if they don't.
But
so that's a preliminary.
But Connie was the only one that you had available to you for such a public display this weekend?
We have several claimants that are going through the process right now. She happened to be the next one. We can't let people go out of order and be tested out of order, because if one of them actually does pass the preliminary, then that's not fair to all the people who have been waiting. So she was the next in line.
Question to Phil Blake. Phil, is the year now since you've been the president?
Almost, yes.
You must be, I trust you're quite satisfied with the way things are going. What is your opinion of the continuation or the possible continuation of the $1 Million Challenge?
Well, I'm thrilled.
I think
that's not just possible, it is continuing.
Yes. Okay. In what state it will continue, we're still working on.
That's what I mean. I wasn't
Yes.
sure.
The $1 million challenge, I think, is a fascinating tool to test claimants and to see how this works. To give the public a chance to see how this works. This is a beautiful example of that because now we have an audience, we have an online audience, and it's not it is in fact a scientific process. There is a claim that is made. We work out a testing protocol for it. There are statistics involved. She had to pick 3 cards. There's a 1 in 10 chance each time. They're independent each time. So, in fact, to get all 3 right, there is a 1 in 1,000 chance. Now, if we were to run this test 1,000 times, there would be a much higher chance of somebody winning. But in each individual test, it's 1 in 1,000. So, if someone, and that is by pure chance only. So, if someone has an ability, then we should see a different amount of people being able to pass this test. So I like this idea as a scientist because it is scientifically testing an unusual claim. And I like the idea that we're going to continue it because I think it's an excellent tool for this. It shows the public how this all works. It shows the public how skeptics analyze evidence. And however we change the challenge in the future, I think that's still going to be at the core of it. It's just going to be more of an administrative change when we do it to make it more streamlined and more efficient so that people can apply more easily and they can be tested more easily.
Would you be happy in a year's time to offer Connie another chance?
That's a protocol question that would go to Jeff or Alice and how that works.
Yes, she can be tested if she reapplies and fits the qualifications that are in place at that time. Okay, Sonne will be over there.
Naomi Baker, Houston Skeptic Society. A question from the chat is very related to what Richard just asked. Is, do you feel that there's some future time that you would reapply for a similar or slightly changed test when you feel that it's time for your powers to be revealed, as you said earlier? Does that make sense? Do you think there's some future times? You mentioned that this was not the correct time to be the truth to be shown.
That's true.
Are you able to tell when that might be the right time?
No, because I can't say the time when well, thanks.
Thank you.
Should you feel that time is upon you, would you reapply for the challenge and try again?
I don't think so. I don't know.
I just wondered, has anyone ever gotten past the protocol?
Past the preliminary testing? No one has ever passed the preliminary test in the history of the challenge.
How many have done the preliminary testing?
That's sort of hard to answer. Surprisingly enough, you'd think it would be a number, 270 or something, literally hundreds. But the answer is not that easy to arrive at because many, many more people make initial application by sending in the form than ever move to the next stage. And it starts out like this. It's a pyramid. A huge number of people applying by sending in the form, and then it drops down whenever you don't hear from a good 80% of those people ever again. And then they don't do this, they don't do this. And finally, you get down to the nitty-gritty here. Actually, only a score or so in a year actually get to the point where they're ready to be now tested for the preliminary test. So it's not an easy number to give you, but it is literally hundreds. And in dowsing alone, that has been at least 80 to 85% of the total claims. Now, Bart Farkas. Bart, you here someplace? Oh, Bart.
Bart, I'm sorry.
Bart, pay attention.
Hello, Bart.
Yes. Bart is preparing a report by analyzing all of the applications that have ever come in for the $1 million prize. We're waiting with great anticipation to see the breakdown on the kind of people, the gender, the location, the age group, and such of people who make these applications, and what happens to the application as they pass down through this exceedingly fine funnel there with a very small outlet on the other end. So that would be an interesting documentation part.
I was just going to say, I would think from the point your files began, which are maybe 35, 40 years ago, there's probably between 150 and 220 preliminary challenges that were
actually got to that point. Got to the point that Connie arrived at today. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The question is to JRF people now. I presume that this test will eventually go on YouTube somehow in some form. Do you think there will be, now that the folks out there can see how it's done and how rigid it is, and that this is a real scientific test, and not just do you think you have less applicants for this, where people think that they can get away with all of the others?
Well, in one way, they will see the integrity of the test. They will see how carefully done it is, and I think you have to agree with this, that what we showed you today is absolute integrity. The care with which it's prepared through various steps and such, and the security with which it's handled is unbeatable. It can't be improved upon, because we could have ended it right at the point where Connie had missed the 3 cards and said, okay, we all go home now. But we insisted on opening up the other envelopes to make sure that it was possibly, there was a possibility that Connie could have won because the card was there and it was properly placed, and etc. So I think this both encourages and perhaps discourages some people. The people it will discourage is people who are trying to do some tricks on us. And we want to get rid of those first. We haven't the time for that. We need sincere people who really believe they've got the power. And if they do, hey, step right up. Here we are.
I'm actually expecting a wall of criticism from folks, or from our detractors who are going to now be able to examine the test and piece by piece try to see a point where the shadow of Vanacek's hand covered a card, and that was the moment he switched the correct card.
Don't give him any ideas.
He's pretty damn clever, but he's not that clever.
I have a question. I mean, I have scientists who have validated me. Can I go out for the...
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. Right away, I'll burn it in the hall.
Right back there.
Yeah, I'm David Richards with the IIG in Los Angeles. I just had a question that wasn't disclosed as part of the test today about the protocol, which is I was a little surprised to see Vanacek carefully keeping the order of the envelopes as they came out of the large envelope, and I'm just curious, how did they get in that order? Who knew what order they were in inside that envelope?
Yeah, that is a good question. When it got to me, all I know is I was told I was not to mix that order up, that I'm not allowed to do that, and that kind of gives you sort of that double blind that somebody else has already mixed them up, they put them inside the envelope, and they come out, I'm not allowed to tamper them, so put them on the table in order, just follow the protocol, that's all, as much as the protocol that I had. Allison can answer the beginning part of that question.
They're actually shuffled and sealed by me at first, then Jeff re-randomized. So I didn't know the order that they were in. Jeff didn't know the order that they were in. Vanacek didn't know the order that they were in.
The obvious concern is that someone could know the order who was in the room, and it sounds like there was no way that you were shuffling them after they were a double envelope, and there was no indications on the outside of the envelope, correct?
Right, because they were randomized twice before Vanacek ever touched them.
Right.
And that was why when Connie said, can we move that one, I was like, no, we cannot change the order of the cards.
Connie, Joe Olmans from Denver, Colorado. As I understand it, you believe that you are the only person who has these powers? Is that right?
No. That's what I didn't say that. Because 1/3 of the population on this earth can do something. And that is the reason why people don't, when they are coming here or to be tested, I'm sure that many of them can do something, but it's not the right time to show people out there if you put them that way. So therefore, nobody has taken the challenge.
I have one more question about the protocol. It seems like everyone from the JREF is very happy with the protocol as you've designed it. Question one, who came up with it? It was mutually agreed to, of course, but who invented that protocol? And the follow-up then would be, are you going to use this exact protocol to do similar tests of dowsing in the future, or every claimant gets different protocol?
Oh, every claimant gets different protocol because every claim is different. Some people say they can determine the colors of cards or objects or poker chips or whatever, and we'll try they can find missing children, oil, gold, whatever. Every claim is totally different from every other claim.
But if another claimant says, I can use dowsing, right?
Yes.
Will you use this exact protocol?
No, it depends on what they say they can do. You see, some of them say I can only find flowing water, flowing fresh water. For example, you know that, Richard, in Australia, of course, dowsing is very, very popular and doesn't work any better than it does here. But nonetheless, they have specific claims. I can only find water which is flowing east and west, etc. They're very specific in most of them in their claims. And the test has to be designed, the protocol has to be designed to accommodate exactly that. The person who makes the claim dictates the rules as to how these things will happen. All we have to do is filter it out in such a way that it's a double-blind procedure and that it is perfectly fair and above board, and the $1 billion is put on the line.
Is this protocol therefore retired? You're not going to use this?
Unless exactly the same claim is made, or if I should wish to come back next year and do the same thing and use the same protocol, we don't know.
Usually when a claimant comes in, there's a small subtlety that's different, and that changes the protocol, even if it's a small subtlety.
Right now, for instance, we do have a claimant. Her name is Ann Gifford, and she will be coming to the front of the line soon. She also does sealed envelope identification, mostly playing cards, but she doesn't do it through dowsing. And as for the protocols, I do initial negotiations. We're at the first draft. And Jeff and I confer over what we've come up with. Everything's worked out with the claimant, and then Randy's contacted to finalize all of them and make any changes that he sees fit.
Do you ever have statisticians or scientists?
Oh yes, Jim Denman does all the numbers for all of these.
Couple of important points here. First off, Allison does the major bulk of the work here, so a lot of what you've seen today is Allison's work. Second, it's really the claimant who designs the challenge. They come to us and tell us what they can do. For example, let's say someone came and said they could predict a coin toss. If you flip a coin, I can tell you what's going to be heads or tails. That is the protocol. That's the nascent protocol. Now, of course, we all know that that's 50-50 and it's not good enough. So we will do the numbers and come back with them and say, okay, if you can do that, can you do this? Because this fits what we need. And then if they agree, yes. If they don't agree, we finesse that. And a lot of times, that's where it ends, because people will not accept anything beyond the 50-50 chances in cases.
Now, you see, the initial thing we require from all the claimants is a simple statement in 3 parts. What can you do, under what circumstances, with what accuracy? And that could be dowsing, that could be flying by flapping the arms, or whatever the claim may be. But under what circumstances, with what accuracy? These are very important. That means that the claimant designs the protocol. All we have to do is organize it and set it up in a certain number of steps that the claimant also agrees with.
Tim Cross from San Francisco. If Connie had passed this initial
preliminary test,
walk us through what the final challenge would have been like.
The next test would be essentially the same, but perhaps with somewhat different security, depending on how the performance went the first time on that same protocol. Or it could be that it would change completely. We've never had to deal with that problem, you see. So we would have to design it as it comes along, I think.
I think what we would do is take a look at the test, analyze it, see if there were any weaknesses there, so we can actually strengthen it and make it a little bit more secure, if that's even possible.
And secure for both sides. Remember that.
In the green.
This is Ross from the Commission on Investigations Group. My question is for Connie. Are you glad that the skeptical community is offering a prize? And is there any recommendation of how you think it could be better? Because if there are these powers, we want to know about them.
Well, I think Jim Randy treated me very well all the time, and I think it's easy. It's easy if you agree the protocol. Well, it had taken some months, but it's okay. And I don't have some comments about that because I think it's fair and easy to confirm.
Yeah, Connie, what James Randy just said was that you are allowed to suggest an initial protocol and then it was modified. How close to your initial suggestion of a protocol was the actual challenge today?
The original, actually, in her application, which you guys can see in your packets, The statement of her claim said that she was able to identify letters written on tiles made out of cardboard, turned upside down on a table. So this was very close. Yes?
Imran Sega from Sydney, Australia. A question to the JREF people. Why did you choose Banachek to conduct the test? You know, you're not concerned that it might there might be some sentiment that the Banachek could do something inappropriate?
There's actually, for me personally, there was no fear of that because I think the protocol was so secure that the tester can't actually alter what happens. He was never given the level of access that would have been needed.
I'm talking completely about perception.
Perception. I think that would be my response to anyone who believed that. He never had the option.
I think you have that perception on both sides and go either way. I think one, you could say, well, maybe he would do something to help Connie. And then there is my background where you may look and say, well, if something was going on, Banachek might be the one that would actually be able to see it if he's sitting right up there, because this is what I do for a living every day. So that perception can go both ways. The bottom line, there is $1 million on the line. So I think if you're going to look and you're going to go, which way I'm going to go, you'd rather have somebody up there that you know could detect the trickery rather than worry so much about the perception of somebody saying, hey, he could be helping or be cheating. The other thing is, it works both ways. I walked up to Randy at the very beginning, and I said, Randy, I said, you know, I just want to make sure, and it was a question I had to ask, because when I work with the scientists, they never did ask, were we magicians? And I said, Randy, this isn't like a publicity stunt. I don't believe that it is, but I'm going to ask you that question. It's not to get to that first stage. And he said, no, of course it's not. And I took him at his word that way. But it is a question I had to put out there. And I had to put it out that I wasn't being like Randy punked or something like that. I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know. I was not allowed to speak to Connie. I had no clue. And the other thing is, it was a little scary for me because the playing card, I can think of multiple ways that somebody, if they wanted to cheat, could cheat. And so as a result, I was not allowed to examine the cards. I was not allowed to look at those. And that was something I worried about. I mean, you know, in the very back of my mind, of course, because I trust Randy with my life, but you just never know. You know, you never really know. And so it worked both ways for me. As a result, they had their double mind to, you know, set it. And that bothered me, but I knew that I had to be put in that position.
And I have a ghost always in the back of my head when one of these things is going to take place. I think of all the possibilities. Because there are so many possibilities. We magicians know what the possibilities are, and we can just sit and tremble just a wee bit. I wonder if we've got a ringer coming in here who is actually a cousin of somebody who, whatever, who has a method. I could have figured, well, we both could, right?
Yeah, no, I already had like three ways in my head of where if Randy wanted to, or somebody else, or Allison, or Allison, you just never know, no offense, Al, but you never know, and I can think of multiple ways that they could have accomplished if they were working with Connie. So you think about this. So I would think that if it had been a success, when you go into the official testing, I probably would not be the tester at that point. That equation would be taken out at that point.
And that very fact is a reason for the two-part, the preliminary and then the formal test. Because, as Steve mentioned very early on in this discussion, the preliminary test, the odds are relatively easy to beat, 1 in 1,000. And we take a great deal of care, but we tend to assume that this is not a clever wizard from across the ocean who has been trained by mystical forces and whatnot, and government agencies and everything to win that $1 billion. We need it to buy something, to blow something up in the United States. No, we don't think that way. We automatically make the assumption, the basic assumption, this is an honest person who believes that he or she has the powers. And that's a safe enough assumption because it's very, very, very probably true. But then, of course, we have the second stage, and that's our safeguard.
Banachek, this is a little strange, but we actually have spare tests. And if you would like to actually go through the test the same way that Connie did, you're welcome to.
Jamy? I can do that. We'll work something out. No, the bottom line is I wouldn't do it as much as I would love to, simply because I feel that we'd be making a mockery of the system.
Yes.
And to be quite honest with you, it shouldn't be made a mockery. This is very serious. I mean, Connie came here, she was very serious about it. And I think we needed to treat it with the same respect and be just as serious, and hopefully that's exactly how we came across in what we did, because that was my intent the entire time. So, we joke about maybe going after that prize money. It would be fun, just as a fun thing to try to do it, but I think it would make a mockery.
I did come up to Banachek at the end and say, you really should have just gone for the fourth envelope.
Yes, right there.
Connie, as was noted before, you seem very certain you had the right card, but did you feel very certain of the pendulum? Did it feel very solid to you, or was there some moments of doubt within your own mind while you were actually?
No, I was sure.
It felt very secure.
This was the card, yeah.
Okay. Just a warning, we're going to have about 10 more minutes here, so let's go ahead and get everybody out of the way we can. Right back there.
Ryan Johnson from Santa Maria. Did I understand you correctly at the beginning of the interviews where you suggested that just prior to arriving at the test site, you said you had a feeling that it was not going to work?
Yeah, from home.
And
just before I left them.
But once you arrived on the test site, you also say that you felt sure when you selected the cards that those would be the cards?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
I don't contradict myself. It is
I just want to make sure I understand you correctly.
Yeah, it is true. Yeah.
Right here.
Andrew Gould from Australia. You've mentioned the source of your insights. You refer to them, and you've also referred or mentioned that you feel that you were not permitted to succeed today. Was it them who were preventing you from succeeding?
Right.
And secondly, if I may, do you know who they are?
Yes, I know.
Can you elaborate?
No, not today. It will come. Otherwise, we say more than you're crazy. I will not tell you now.
Okay.
So, today you have been here playing with cards and with us, and we enjoy it. But you know that in the case of Maddie, you are playing with the feelings of family, of
course.
Yeah. You realize
this. I'm not here for just $1 million.
Yeah,
I'm not here for playing.
Okay, it's just
it's seriously.
Okay. Anyway, you know in Europe how many children disappear every year?
I do know.
Yes.
I do know.
Why did you choose?
Why do you hear about Maddie all the time and not the other kids?
Why did you choose the only one who was in the media? Why not another one?
Why not?
Because they told you.
It is so. It's so.
Because they told you.
Because they told me.
That's right.
I did this way. Because it's along the same lines there. Today, you failed on the test today, yet at the time you felt they were telling you what the cards were, you felt you were right. And I just have to ask it one more time, because it is an important question that you're asking right there, I think. How do you know that they are not telling you wrong about Maddie? As much as you convinced 100% that you were 100% right about the cards, how can you have some doubt there at all?
Because I have evidences, as I told you. I found her twice. I have the evidences of it. I have it in my hands. Everybody can listen to it. Everybody can see some things.
Okay, that makes more sense.
It makes more sense, right?
Well, yeah, that's what it is.
Okay, one more and then we're going to close it out.
Okay, I don't want to sound impertinent, Connie. David Richards again. I just wondered if anyone has ever referred you to the ideomotor effect. Have you ever heard that term?
I don't know.
Have you ever seen a definition? Okay.
I have a really good book written on it.
Connie, I suggest that seriously, and in all spirit of friendliness and such, that you really should read what the ideomotor response is. It's a very strong psychological effect of which most people are quite unconscious. And if you were to read up on that, you may have something to ponder about. Just a suggestion, if I may.
Try to one more time.
Oh, yeah. There is something in psychology called the ideomotor effect. And it's a very, very strong impulse that most people are totally unaware of, and I've seen many, many instances of it. And most of the belief that dowsers have in their success is due to the ideomotor effect, but it is not a genuine power or ability of detection or perception. It's purely a psychological self-deception. I suggest you can find that on our site, as a matter of fact. Ideomotor, IDEOMOTOR, ideomotor effect. It's very strong. Yeah. It's not very well known. It's not very well recognized.
It's not the truth. It is not. So, no. Well, thank you.
I think what Connie is saying, she believes she has evidence, physical evidence already.
Yes.
That
I understood that, yes.
That convinces her that's right.
So.
Okay, I think we're going to close out now. Thank you all so much for attending.
May I say just one more thing before we go, folks? I sincerely want to thank this young lady for coming all this distance. She had the conviction, the strength of her convictions, and we are honored to have had her here. And certainly she was a wonderful guest, and we owe her a lot. We owe her a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Matt. Very well. Thank you. Thank you.
So according to Connie, at the time of the press conference, she thought the test was fair and had no problems at all with Banachek being involved. Sadly, it wasn't long after the test that she switched her blame from them, whoever they are, to blaming Banachek himself and accusing him of cheating by using sleight of hand. She made these allegations on the James Randi forum boards. From what I saw at the test and in the press conference, Connie was treated with respect, politeness, and gratitude throughout her adventure. That she would find something or someone to blame for her failure was simply no surprise at all. This is par for the course. Banachek is an honourable and honest man. But as anyone can see from watching the test, it was Connie who failed all by herself. She, at the time of testing, simply did not display any paranormal powers. Thank you for joining me for the Skeptic Zone. Join us again next week when we'll have a grain of salt with Iran, Dr. Raichi reports, and the think tank. Until then, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to The Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.
The Skeptic Zone.